Hello, my friends. So, I decided to do another video on titration because that is how important I feel like this topic is. I have another video this week that talks about it a little bit in terms of your healing process and specifically chronic illness and flares, right? Like how do we use titration and knowing our capacity to prevent flares while we heal, and also make sure we're feeling those tough spots and processing through big emotions. So it's this delicate dance of feeling the edge of something big and not going into overwhelm so much that we're going into flares, right? That would be the autoimmune and chronic symptoms response. So we have to ensure that we go slow bit by bit as to not put more into the system than the system can handle. So it's as to not overwhelm. However, we still have to process our big stuff in order to heal. And I wanted to do this video to speak specifically on the work of Peter Levign and some quotes from his book on the topic of titration that is talking specifically to nervous system, whereas my other video is sort of my take on it and speaking specifically to chronic illness. Both are very important and are just sort of little bit different ways of explaining the same thing. But the information is so important, and understanding this concept and actually walking the walk of titration is vital for healing, okay? Because when we do not titrate and we go outside of that capacity, we do have the potential of re-traumatization. That's actually when re-traumatization happens. And so those of you who are on this channel, there are, like I've said in other videos, many different layers to autoimmune, and everyone is very specific. However, a lot of us don't heal with diet and lifestyle changes alone. And so if you're here, probably you have an underlying root cause of trauma and nervous system dysregulation. So it's also important to understand how we weave in titration even with the diet and lifestyle stuff, which is stuff that I explain more in my other video on titration. Okay, so this is more just the core foundational definition and where it came from for titration. Okay, all right. So going slow is where the magic happens when we are feeling something big come up in the system, right? But we have to integrate in tiny bits these big sensations. Those of us with chronic symptoms, we don't have, if we're just getting into this work, if you've been doing some of this work already, you might have an awareness around this, but a lot of us, before we get to this work, we don't have any awareness around what has led up to that big flare, right? It's like we might be going outside of capacity, not even realizing it, thinking that we're feeling great. However, we're over-adrenalized and our cortisol is running high. And then boom, we hit a flare and we hit chronic fatigue and shut down. And we don't understand why we're having this flare because we just had 4 days where we felt great and we had so much energy, right? This happens all the time. In those moments leading up to that flare, there were little bits of red flags. There were little bits of sensations, big things that may have happened that seemed unimportant, right? And maybe we bypassed that and we didn't pause in that moment where we felt something big. We didn't pause in that moment where somebody said something to us and we felt something big. Our inner child got big emotions in that moment and we didn't pause. We just went on to the next thing. That was our opportunity, that going slow. When we didn't go slow and we didn't pause, we may have missed the opportunity for a process. And the reason we probably missed the opportunity for the process is because the pattern of bypassing is way more comfortable in the moment than actually pausing and feeling what's coming up. And potentially some of you guys think that if you pause and feel these big feelings, it might be never ending. And that is the space where titration comes in, because we actually don't want this never-ending dark hole of grief and abandonment and all these big things that we may actually be feeling a lot of on the inside to all come out at once and have this potential for this re-traumatization. So there has to be somewhere between where we pause and we notice and we don't go down into the depths of our darkness, our shadow, right? Okay. If we don't process, then that trapped stored survival stress. So when something happens, it's kind of poking at something that's already existing from early childhood developmental trauma, or an acute trauma situation, right? And it's touching on a stored survival response, stress that's trapped in the body. When these things come up, it's our opportunity to process that through, or at least these little bits, these titrated bits of it. If we don't process that through, then that survival stress continues to stay stuck. Okay. But we can't take on so much sensation that we get caught up in a wheel or a loop that doesn't get us anywhere. That is what when re-traumatization occurs. It's the tiny bits so that there is no more chaos and simultaneously processing what it is that is coming up to the surface. Okay? So, this somatic work was brought to light by Peter Levign, the founder of Somatic Experiencing. And he is the one who brought in the titration term into this work. I learned this through my teacher, Irene Lyon. Okay. So this video is largely kind of a different sort of repeating what I have learned through Irene's videos on titration. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I said that, because if you haven't seen Irene Lyon's YouTube channel, then I would definitely go on and check that out, because she has a lot of amazing information. So the term titration came from a chemical, what does she call it? It's from, organic chemistry. It's an organic chemistry term, okay? And Peter was the person who brought it into the nervous system and trauma healing world in his work. But in the organic chemistry definition of it, the original definition of it in organic chemistry. I'm quoting Irene here, and she got this from another, some organic chemistry source. Okay. The definition is slowly adding in one known solution to a known volume of another solution of unknown concentration, knowing one piece of one and not knowing the other. We put them together in bits until the reaction reaches neutralization. The small doses is so that they do not overreact and explode. So this is my metaphor for this. It's like tempering an egg is the way I think of it. I am not a chemist. I am not a scientist of any kind. I am, however, a cook. So this is my take on it. And those of you who have cooked or who've watched a cooking show where you know what tempering an egg is like. So if we want, let's say, egg drop soup, right? And we don't want scrambled egg, but we got to get that egg in that soup where it actually keeps its consistency a little. It neutralizes to the temperature of the soup by adding it in slowly. It would also be like making homemade mayonnaise. We start actually with the egg, and then we pour tiny bits of olive oil in, okay, as it's blending, tiny, tiny bits, titrating, tiny, tiny bits, so that the egg and the oil don't stay separated. This is a, pat myself on the back. This is a great way of explaining it, okay? So we want that really nice creamy consistency of mayonnaise. If we just dump the oil in there, it doesn't explode necessarily, but it doesn't blend together in this nice, beautiful, cohesive texture. They stay separated and like kind of gross. Like you can, it's like all whatever. It also might be like adding cream to a really hot soup, right? We don't want that cream to curdle and be like separate. We want it to, so they're using the term neutralization, but it's kind of the same thing, right? We're sort of neutralizing this in a way. We're making this one consistent, cohesive, blended, creamy texture, either with the soup or the mayonnaise. So, but it has to be added in those tiny little bits. If you rush trying to make homemade mayonnaise, it will not. I've done it. It doesn't work. Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to give you guys, and then I would go visit the other video on titration if it's out when you see this, and hear a little bit more on my perspective on it, specifically to chronic symptoms and autoimmune. But I'm going to leave you with Peter Levign's quote on titration from his book, In an Unspoken Voice. Okay? Quote, "We use titration to create increased stability, resilience." Sorry about that. I'm going to start over. "We use titration to create increased stability, resilience, and organization." When I heard this from Irene, she added, in the nervous system, right? We're creating increased stability, resilience, and organization in the nervous system. When I think about that word organization in the nervous system, that is such a beautiful explanation of what we want, right? That I love the word. I mean, all of it, stability, resilience, organization just does something for me personally, because I'm like, that's what I want, It's like everything knows its part, Everybody knows how to go into that organized, nice flow, right? Titration is about carefully touching into the smallest drop of survival-based arousal or other difficult sensations to prevent re-traumatization. It promotes the gradual step-by-step process of trauma renegotiation, right? Trauma renegotiation. I love these two examples, these quotes that I took, and I love them so much. Obviously, I did this video just for this, and I don't know that it's necessary that I have to explain this last quote in an unspoken voice, which if you haven't read any of Peter Levign's books, you definitely might want to visit those. I've listened to a lot of them on audiobooks. But I just want to end by saying this. A lot of us who have healed and turned around autoimmune and chronic symptoms, everyone I know, I'll say it that way, everyone I know has done it by slowing down, by slowing something down a lot. And those people also that I know who have come into regulation and trauma healing, even if they didn't have chronic symptoms, but they're on doing this healing work for other reasons. The piece about the titration, I cannot stress enough, like how foundational and fundamental it is. When I work with my clients one-on-one, in the first many sessions, we're just working on this piece for a long time. Yes, it is about feeling what is there, all of these things, dropping them deeper into their parasympathetic, most of them, and teaching them how to titrate their daily lives, right? It's like titrating in session when we're actually focusing specifically on this work, but it's also titrating our entire lives so that we are not blowing ourselves out. And if we are experiencing flares, then that is what is happening on some level in some way. Okay, that is all for now. I will see you guys later, and I hope this finds you very well.